Personal Growth Strategy for Entrepreneurs Part 2. I'm going to be building on the concept that I was talking about last week, a big black filing cabinet, which is sort of the place that our brain takes up for storage. And we're looking at the brain's filing system as well, the automatic thinking patterns and habits that we all have. And for those of you who may have missed last week's, the part 1, you can get the YouTube link as well. Just a tiny bit about me. I'm an emotional intelligence coach and I'm a mentor. I'm a qualified psychotherapist and an author of a book called Navigating Stress. Today, I work with business owners and entrepreneurs who want to be psychologically strong in the face of overwhelm and anxiety and feelings of wanting to give up. I don't know if you've been there, but I know that it gets me like that sometimes. Yeah, business can be tricky. So my premise is you don't grow the business unless you grow the owner. And the reason why I say that is that my journey has been one of learning so many things and doing so many courses. I've noticed that every time I up level the way that I think, my business improves too. Before we get started, I'd like to get you to think about how you think about this topic. It's all about thinking habits and patterns. It may be an important issue to you, it may not be. So, on a scale of 1 to 10, just think about whether it's something you do think about all the time, constantly. That's a 10. If you don't give it much thought, it might be a 1 or a 0. Now, I believe, and I don't know if you do too, that everything starts with a thought. Hopefully will make sense as we go along. But even the idea that you've had for your business, or if you're thinking about business, or anything else where you're ambitious and you're moving on and having to create something, everything starts with a thought. And given that we have between 50 to 70,000 thoughts a day, and they're automatic, and they're not all true, I think it's a huge issue for us as human beings, but definitely when we're in business. And this is my own replication of what a thought looks like. It's glowing, it's trying to do something, and it's thinking what, where, when, why, how. It really, really wants us to think about what's happening and file it away, because I think we're meaning making machines. We have to label things and then put them away. I call it a unit of thought sometimes, but of course, there's no real measurement. It's not like a calorie. It's an electrical energy which is picked up on these ECGs that we can do, the electroencephalograms. I'm glad I've managed to say that properly. But that's what a thought represents to me, and it gives it something concrete for us to hold on to as well. Now, the average person, they have over 60,000 thoughts a day, and it could be less, could be slightly more. People like researchers, Dr. Fred Luskin at Stanford University and others. Stanford University is an important place in terms of looking at the way that we think. He's decided that 90% of our thoughts that get repeated through the day, they're taken from what's happening and also the previous day's thoughts. So there's a real kind of recycling going on with our thought patterns. And I'm always looking at the psychology needed to grow your business. Let's look at human beings. Of course, entrepreneurs are human beings. We're not special in that respect. And what do we make these thoughts mean? We are meaning-making machines. Every event that happens to us, we have to work out, what does that mean to us? What does that tell us about ourselves, our traits, our personality, our capabilities, and more? And what does that tell us about other people? That's a big thing. What does it tell us about other people? Because not only are we assessing ourselves, we're also judging other people. And obviously, every situation that happens to us in life, whether it's things that we can control or we can't control, we have to give it a meaning. And I put down here a timeline. I've got down here from 5 years old to 80. But of course, it could be a much longer life for us all, given the way that technology is going. So I could extend that to, I don't know, 110, 120, I don't know. But it's a long life. I'd like to think that I haven't got the thought patterns and the same thinking as a 5-year-old, but let's find out. From the moment that we're born, we're thinking of stuff. The thoughts of a 7-year-old child on the left-hand side, thoughts of ice cream, thoughts of playing, thoughts of their friends. Move on to the thoughts of a teenager, PlayStations, hopefully going out with your friends and doing a bit of socializing, but very, very different thoughts to the 7-year-old. Then we move on to the adult, sat there with a calculator, looking at spreadsheets. It's business. And These thoughts, as I said, we're having them all our life and we're having to make sense of all the situations that happen to us. What happens to all that thinking and all that data? It's a big question, isn't it? With 50 to 70,000 thoughts that we can be having, and they're automatic and they're not necessarily true. Perhaps we should be thinking about what happens to this data. I like to think that every bit of information that we have, I know it's going to be put somewhere. I call it tagging it and bagging it, all the life experiences. And what do we do with those bits of information? We stash them somewhere. I like to think there's an attic and there's a big black filing cabinet up there in the attic with every single thought that we have had throughout our whole life. And we develop our own kind of unique system and our own way of organizing our thoughts. And they become patterns and they become habits. And again, we've all got our own filing cabinet. Mine can be a bit random sometimes, a bit higgledy-piggledy. And when we're stressed and when we're traumatized, information doesn't always go in as neatly as we would like it to be. And if we lose things, we're in trouble. Because the big question is, do we remember that we put the data away, stash that data away, and can we access it when we need it? I think that the thoughts and what's happening to us, because we're thinking them continuously, and repeating them, they can become like the backdrop to our life, like being in a movie, your own movie with your own soundtrack. And it's totally unconscious because a thought becomes a belief. And a belief is just the thought that's repeated over and over and over again. And my little stick figure in the corner saying, OMG, oh my God, because it's a bit like that to think that we are repeating a series of images or repeating a series of phrases and words, and we're no longer aware of it. And there's a very good film which I watch called Groundhog Day. You may have watched it yourself, but it is where the lead actor keeps repeating his life over and over again. So you might not believe me. Let's do this thought challenge. I'd like you to name 10 physical items that you have put somewhere, possibly your attic. You may have a cupboard. You may have put it behind your sofa or underneath your bed. Let's think about 10 items. Now, if you can think of one or two, just drop them in the chat for me, because you may not get to 10 items. And I'm going to think about my 10 items that I've got up there in the attic. I've got a radiator, I've got some stationery, I've got a sewing machine. My partner's probably put some boxes up there of his musical equipment. And then my brain stops. I really can't go any further. But let's think about what's up there in the attic or behind the sofa or in a cupboard. Um, yeah, drop them in the chat. Let's see what's being said. Would love to know. Boxes of picture frames. Yes. Oh, and shoes. Goodness me. Clothes. Oh, wow. You know what? We've got a lot of stuff up there. It's interesting, isn't it? Old books from school. Leo's put down emotional scars. Wow. That's a heavy one. But yes, there is stuff that's hidden and we don't remember it anymore. I have my 7-year-old Joy, and she has got her own little filing cabinet. This is a selection of the things that she has up there as well, stored. Uh, she said things like, "Oh, why does it all go wrong? Why does it always go wrong?" And all she's done is just messed up on a drawing, at school. She says things like, "Bad things only happen to me," because her best friend, her play date, cancelled, had to go off somewhere with her mum. She says, "I should be able to cope with this by now." She's doing another maths test and it's all going wrong. She says things like, "I'm so stupid. No one else behaves like me or like this." Because when the teacher asked her to answer a question, she stammered and she really couldn't get the answers out. One of her biggest thoughts is, "I am such a failure." She won the second prize for drawing. She quite liked drawing dresses and doing designs. She got second prize, but that's not good enough for her. She's come up thinking, "I am such a failure." Now, this is where all the rules and the habits and the patterns start to be formed when we're really, really young. And my drawer is full of disappointments, regrets, competitions that I've entered, didn't win, painful thoughts, and so much more. And it's interesting that my 7-year-old's filing cabinet is very memorable for me. And there's an even bigger problem on top of that. Like I said, we have 50 to 70,000 thoughts. They're not all true. Sometimes little Joy, little 7-year-old Joy, she's running, or should I say ruining, my business. I take her to work sometimes. I don't take the teenager. I don't take the adult. I take this young child with me. And I do know when she's at play, when she's ruling my business, because I have really weird thoughts. So these unconscious rules and these thought habits, they're happening 90% of the time on automatic. They need to be investigated. In my world, I make an effort to try and investigate what's going on for me, especially when I'm not feeling good. And does this really matter in business? I like to think that it does. So let's go another layer deeper. You can think about this like peeling back an onion and getting one layer deeper and then another and another and another until you perhaps get closer to understanding what that thought meant, why it was put there, and whether you're going to change it. Why do we think like this? Why do we actually have thinking habits and thinking patterns and they're automatic and they're quick? Why do we have them? Three reasons I've got here. The first one, it's an evolutionary reason. It's a survival mechanism, and we have to respond very quickly to threats and to dangers. The second one is it's just efficient for our brain, cognitive efficiency. We make decisions. We don't want to make too many, especially when they seem similar. So we take shortcuts like everything else in life. We take a shortcut and we rely on very familiar habits and patterns. And the last thing is it's a learned behavior. I know that I've learned a lot of stuff to stop me from feeling anxious. And anxiety is about trying to make life very predictable. So it's a learned behavior. The habits and the patterns are developed and they get reinforced as well by repeating similar experiences, or I would say creating them or recreating them. And again, the evolutionary mechanism, it can misfire. And then what does it create in business? In business, some of these automatic responses are not clever. They actually trigger a lot of stress and a lot of anxiety over events that really and truly are not life threatening or even severe. When it affects our cognitive abilities, way of processing things, this efficiency part of why we might do it leads to bad decision makings, wrong decision making. We miss opportunities, we fail to adapt and to take on information or look at changing our circumstances. And the last reason why this happens, we are logging negative experiences all of the time. Failures, successes, setbacks, we're learning them, and they can become quite ingrained. Again, these patterns will hinder creativity, growth, and innovation. So the learned behavior, the cognitive efficiency, and the evolutionary mechanism, that's why we have these patterns of thinking and the habit formation. Big question. How do you see life? Now, I've got a series of sunglasses up here. There are actually 10 sunglasses. We all see life differently. Why is that the case? Sometimes we might be wearing a series of different glasses. Hopefully not all of them all at the same time, but who knows? This is a list of the items, the ways in which we can distort the way that we see the world. We can become catastrophizers. We can become black and white thinkers. That's all or nothing thinkers. People might see that written down too. We overgeneralize. We filter ideas, mental filtering. We don't look at the good stuff. We disqualify the positive stuff. We take things personally. We begin to jump to conclusions. We also can magnify problems and minimize problems. Emotional reasoning. We begin to reason with our hearts and what's going on in our body, the sensations in our body. And last of all, the should statements. And the should statements are really about us being quite hypercritical about ourselves. Sometimes we procrastinate. Sometimes we're very tough on ourselves. So these are 10 different ways that we can look at life. I don't know if I go through all of them during the day, but I certainly do recognize a lot of them. And just out of curiosity, just say yes in the comments if you do think you're guilty of some of these ways of seeing life. Oh my God, a 10. 100%. Yeah. Okay. You're with me on that one, guys. So let's think about automatic thinking. I think I've written this slide wrong, but automatic thinking happens 90% of the time, and that should be doing it unconsciously. And real time thinking, 10% of the time, doing it consciously. Business owners cannot afford to sleepwalk through life, so thinking real time is a big issue. How we make sense of the world, it really, really, really does matter. In business, this is how it can look. Now, I've got a list of 40 items on a PDF which are bad for business, and you're welcome to that. The link for that is at the top of the chat box. You might recognize some of these thoughts. I'm not cut out for this kind of stress. I'm too old or I'm too young to be taken seriously in business. I'm not a natural born leader. I'm not smart enough to solve this problem. No one is interested in me, my products, my services, or what I have to offer. I really should work much harder. I should be making more money by now. My business will fail because I'm not a good enough salesperson. I should be able to handle this on my own. And I can't balance my personal life and my business life successfully. Now, these are just 10 items that I know a business owner can have, but I'm looking at these thoughts and I can see some of them from my 7-year-old, strangely enough. She says things like, I should be able to handle this on my own. Hmm. And I don't know, I think she felt that she was so young that people didn't take her seriously. I was quite a serious little child. I really was. So I do recognize some of these thoughts. And they're not logical. And I also know they're not true, but we believe them on an emotional level. They can also look like this. They can be behaviors that you see if you're in business as well. You have to work late. You don't finish off projects on time. You say, if I don't finish it, nobody else will. I have to work late in the office. I don't have time for a lunch break. I need my mobile phone really near me just in case there's a problem. I can't say no to that nightmare client. So we all have people that we work with. They can be co-workers that we can't say no to as well. We might think the business strategy is not working out for us. I have to cancel that date with my partner or with my children or with my friends. Um, I really don't have time to go to the doctors to sort out that pain that I can feel in my stomach, which is a bit of an ouch. And really, I should make time to do some sales calls. I really don't feel like it. That one gets me every single time. So what's going on? Where are all of these excuses coming from? And like I said, you can pick up the PDF, 40 thoughts that are bad for business. We really do have to grow the owner in order to grow the business. Let's just go another layer deeper and look at the distorted thinking patterns and habits that happen. There's going to be a set of 10 items that we're going to quickly look at. So you can begin to see whether this fits into your world and it makes sense for you. Catastrophizing. The definition is always looking at the worst case scenario. Now, I know I'm a bit of a drama queen. I live in this space a lot of the time. It might look like this. If I make a mistake, I might think everyone's going to think that I'm incompetent and I'm going to lose my job. Obviously, I'm in charge of myself and it's my business. I'm going to have to sack myself, won't I? It's crazy, but catastrophizing is not a fun place. The real challenge that you should be doing is getting evidence to either agree with what you've just said or find evidence to dispute it. Black and white thinking is very interesting too, all or nothing thinking, very extreme thinking. So if I'm not perfect, then there's a problem. If I'm a total failure, that's a problem. But we've got this black and white thinking, which is I must be perfect or I'm not perfect, or I'm a total failure or I'm a total success. There's no nuances, no variations in that. There's no middle ground and there's no grays. So the challenge is to find that for yourself. I try to remember the keyboard, a piano keyboard, black and white keys, goes from low scales to the high scales, lots of variation. So I know that I have to widen my thinking. The other thing that we do is we generalize. I'm guilty of a lot of these. We make these sweeping generalizations. I failed terribly at doing this webinar and sharing my information. I'm never going to be doing this again, and I'm never going to be able to speak in public again. So, really dramatic. If you do this a lot, consider other ways of looking at things. My best action is getting a coin, two sides to a coin. If you're thinking on one side, flip that coin and find me an alternative way of looking at it. Disqualifying the positives. Now, good stuff happens in life too, but we can be really bad at taking on board the good stuff to balance out the bad stuff. We reject it basically. It looks a bit like this. You do well on a project or a task that you're doing, and you just put it down to luck. Oh, I was just lucky. I would say You weren't lucky, you worked quite hard for that. You were working late, you were doing all kinds of things, but you've just dismissed it. So disqualifying the positives is something that human beings do. And entrepreneurs, if you're doing that, you're missing out on that good juice, that good positive juice, which keeps you going and lifts your emotions. It's actually quite important to be positive and happy in business. But if you're pulling yourself down in these kinds of ways, it's just not useful. But I'm going to hold my hand up. Sometimes I do this too. The next thing is mental filtering. So stuff comes in, but of course you can't see the good stuff. It's a bit like the last one. You might have noticed that there's an error in your report. So you decide that the entire report must be bad. So it's the way in which we jump to conclusions and just take it straight to the negative. Got to balance it out with a bit of positivity. Now, personalization is interesting. We can get into a place where we blame ourselves for everything. And if we can't blame ourselves for everything, then we blame somebody else. Things can feel out of control, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's down to you, especially when you're part of a team or part of a group of people doing that one particular task. So I want you to consider the external factors and share some of that responsibility. Jump into conclusions. You're making a lot of assumptions without having enough evidence. So you've got to seek that feedback and get that clarification. And then magnifying and minimizing, we've more or less covered that. We play down our good stuff. If we've achieved things, we sort of say, oh, it doesn't really matter. If we've made a mistake, we make that the biggest thing ever. So getting things in perspective and recognizing our achievements is really, really important. Emotional reasoning, interesting one. This is where we use the sensations in our body to dictate what's happening out in the world. We sort of have a feeling, oh, I'm feeling like this, so therefore this must be happening. For example, I'm feeling anxious about this project, so it's going to fail. Or sometimes you might say, oh, I'm feeling really nervous. I don't think it's going to be a really good day. We're using our feelings to actually predict what's happening out there in the world, which isn't necessarily a good way to make a judgment. We've got to separate the facts from our feelings and be more objective. And the last one is the should statements. Now, this is the place where a lot of us may be living, very self critical. I should do this. I must do this. I ought to do this. It can be coming from a place where we've been criticized by someone in the past. And even though they're not there in front of us, we become the person that beats ourselves with a stick. Things like, I should be productive all the time. I mustn't make mistakes. I should know better. We set such high expectations of ourselves, which are unrealistic, and it can make us really unhappy and actually quite anxious and depressed. So that's a bit of a deeper dive into what's happening with those negative thought patterns and negative habits that might be running, or should I say, ruining your business. Questions that you can ask yourself. Is this 100% true? Will I still feel like this tomorrow? Is this just my 7-year-old self talking to me, scared and also scarred? Am I in physical danger? Is there a wild animal in front of me? Is there a flood? Is there a fire? Use your body in that instance to tell you that there isn't much going on. If there is, do something about it, definitely. And is there another way of looking at this? But remember a coin, I'm sure you do, two sides to a coin. Flip that coin and think of an alternative way of looking at something. It works for me. And the last one, which is my favorite, I'm a big fan of Oprah Winfrey. What would Oprah say to me about this? What would she say? Now, she's my kind of superhero. You can take anyone that you hold in high regards, and what would they say? This really opens up our thinking and stops us from being stuck in our old familiar patterns and gives us a much wider perspective. This is a slide full of information, guys, but very quickly, it's important for business owners to consider these ideas, in my opinion, because it improves decision making, you get better relationships, increases productivity. It can also reduce your stress, so it's quite good for stress management. Also might help you to deal with any conflicts that come along. Improves your leadership. We're all trying to be a leader. First of all, we're the leader of one, and then we can become the leader of many. Clearer communication, gives us stronger negotiation skills. Reputation management, our professional reputation is absolutely important. And personal growth, which is where I'm at. Balancing our business life with our personal life, or harmonizing our lives, because perhaps there is no such thing as balance. So Everything starts with a thought. Thoughts influence the way that we behave and feel. And just remember that we've got stuff up in the attic, tagged and bagged, put away in that filing cabinet, guys. It's glowing, as you can see around the edges. And that little person there could be me, could be you, about to file something away in the attic. So a thought becomes a belief because we repeat it over and over again. So remember, it's a form of self-hypnosis. We make assumptions, we form opinions, we make rules on the basis of the thoughts and the things that are happening for us. Thoughts begin to feel like a fact. So you start creating your own encyclopedia, and really you're not sure if any of that stuff is true. And it also becomes the soundtrack and the background to our lives. We're living our lives over and over again, repeating a lot of the same things, repetitive thoughts, things that you thought the day before, repeated thoughts that you're having right now during the day. It's why it's important to have a look at this. Now, let's redo that assessment. Let's look at how important it is to think about your thinking habits and patterns. Look at that on a scale of 1 to 10 again. 1 being you don't think it's important, 10 being you think it's really, really important. For some people, this number may have changed on the basis of the information that I've given you. I've changed your thinking. So I have been planting some seeds of information in your head about this. The entrepreneur's journey is to recognize the thought and habit patterns that are happening for themselves. You can't quite recognize them for other people, but you can ask them now that you're more knowledgeable and you want to minimize the impact that it's having in your business. My job is not to overwhelm you, but I want you to take away at least one idea that makes sense to you and that you can think about during the week. Self reflection works, paying a little bit more attention, doing that inner self growth work. It doesn't have to be hard. I know that people might give the impression that it's hard, but probably if we're getting into the space of thinking about growing ourselves so we can grow our business, we're beginning to look at what we do and how we can change. So if you do want the 40 negative thoughts that are bad for business, look at the top of the chat box because we don't grow the business, we grow the owner. Now, the poem that I found today, which was quite interesting, it says, be careful of your thoughts, for your thoughts become your words, and be careful of your words, because your words become your actions. Be careful of your actions, because your actions become your habits. Be careful of the habits, because the habits become your character. And be careful of your character, because your character becomes your destiny. A Chinese proverb by someone unknown, but yes, very wise words. So I do hope you enjoyed that, and go to YouTube to see part 1 in case you missed that. Again, the link is at the top of the comments box. And these are ways in which you can contact me. So my name's Joy Langley. Email is joy@joylangley.com. My website is joylangley.com. So I know that some of you are going to have some questions. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen right now, and I am going to